Why do mothers kill their children? There is no single answer to this question, as the reasons for maternal filicide, which is the act of a mother killing her child, can really vary greatly depending on the individual circumstances. Some common factors that have been identified in cases of maternal filicide include mental illness, substance abuse, a history of abuse or neglect, stress, and a lack of support or resources. In some cases, the mother may also be experiencing significant life changes, such as financial difficulties or relationship issues. And while the vast majority of mothers would never harm their children in such a way, it seems as if it's on the rise these days, and we are hearing about it happening more and more. And that is the unfortunate circumstance of today's case. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life, so buckle up and get ready, and let's dive right in. Louise Porton was born on August 23, 1996 in Rugby, United Kingdom, and grew up in a very loving family. Despite this, though, she was often seen as an outsider within her own family. Additionally, her behavior was noted to be violent, which caused her siblings and cousins to be a bit wary of her. One of her cousins even had reported that Louise would try to attack the other children, but would do it in such a way that it didn't attract the attention of any of the adults who were around them. When Louise was 11 years old, her mother Sharon left the family to be with another man, leaving her father to raise Louise and her two siblings alone. Now, this abandonment by her mother had a very significant impact on Louise and caused a great deal of pain. As a result, Louise chose to sever all ties with her mother and refused to have any contact with her in the future. Her mom attempted to reconnect over the years, but Louise refused to let her back in. She was heartbroken and wanted to distance herself from her mother. She wanted no part of that. She felt abandoned, and honestly, I don't blame her. But as Louise entered her teenage years, her behavior started to become even more erratic and very concerning. She became fixated on money and began displaying behaviors that were a cause for concern. One of her family members, specifically her grandmother Joy, started to notice things that were going missing from her home after Louise would visit. Anytime Louise would show up, things suddenly disappeared. So when Joy confronted Louise about the missing items, Louise became extremely angry and very defensive, threatening to never come back to visit her grandmother if she continued to accuse her of stealing things. Now, with that, I just want to say there's an old expression that I actually learned from my father, and I think about it still to this day after he taught me about it when I was very young. And it's that fear generates anger. So a lot of the time when people have an angry or defensive response, it can stem from fear. The fear of being caught, the fear of losing a family member because you are caught doing something. So she lashes out at her grandmother saying, "I'm never going to come back if you continue to accuse me of things," kind of gaslighting a little bit, also getting very defensive. But could it be generated through fear? Possibly. So after leaving home at the age of 16, Louise began to engage in a very dangerous lifestyle, and this lifestyle included very heavy drinking and even drug use. As time went on, it escalated. She developed a sex addiction that led her to become involved with numerous men. Her family, of course, grew increasingly worried about her relationships with these men, and Louise was particularly infatuated with those who had money or the men who were willing to buy her gifts and give her cash. She became obsessed with attracting and pleasing these powerful men, often bragging on social media about how much money she could make from selling sex. Her behavior raised significant concerns among her family members, who were not only worried about her safety, but of course also worried about her well-being. When her grandmother Joy fell ill and was declared to be in a terminal condition, Louise refused to visit her, causing a lot of tension within the family. Even during Joy's final moments, Louise did not come and say goodbye to her grandmother. And then after Joy passed away, Louise didn't even attend the funeral, leading many family members to be upset and angry with her, so much so that they completely severed ties with her. They felt that she only cared about her grandmother when there was some sort of financial gain involved, and that she wasn't there when Joy needed her the most. As one family member put it, she was always around when Nan was handing out pocket money, but when she needed her most, Louise was nowhere to be found. Not to mention, her grandmother Joy was a very significant figure in Louise's life. She was there for Louise when her own mother wasn't, and instead of being there for her grandmother in her time of crisis and need, Louise couldn't be bothered to show up for her, or even show respect and attend the funeral. Because at this point, what would Louise gain physically or financially from it? Which really just shows the lack of empathy that Louise has. Louise became pregnant at a very young age and gave birth to her first daughter, Lexi Draper, when she was just 18 years old. And if you're a mother, you know that having a child can be proven to be very difficult at any age. However, when you're 18 years old, have zero support system, and cannot provide a financially stable environment, it's even more challenging. And then just 2 years later came Louise's second daughter, Scarlett Vaughn. In August of 2016, Louise was residing in Skidor, a town in Rugby where she was living in council housing as a single mother of 2 children. Her first daughter, Lexi, was now 3 years old at the time, and her second daughter was only 16 months old at this time. Louise tightly controlled their father, Chris Draper's contact with the children, even denying him the opportunity to meet Scarlett, their youngest daughter. She would constantly play these sick mind games with Chris, trying to convince him that he actually was not the girl's father. Additionally, she gave Scarlett the surname of a different boyfriend entirely, effectively attempting to sever any relationship and potential lineage connection between Chris and Scarlett. Chris, though, remained steadfast in his determination to reunite with his daughters, including his youngest daughter, whom he had never even met. Despite facing repeated rejections and disappointments, he continued to fight tirelessly for custody and visitation rights, refusing to give up on his dream of being a present and loving father to his children. Louise, who is now living in a cramped and uncomfortable bedsit, which is like a living situation that consists of a single room that serves as a bedroom, a living room, and kitchenette all in one. She was living in there with her 2 young daughters, and she had fashioned herself as a part-time model, a title that she employs as a euphemism for her actual profession as a sex worker. Her services including selling nude photos of herself to men that she met online in exchange for money. She would offer sexual encounters to random men that she would meet in person, and she would even invite these strangers back to her small living quarters to have sex with them physically, all while her children were in the room with her. The potential dangers of this lifestyle are abundantly clear, as she recklessly risked the safety and well-being of both herself and her innocent children by engaging in these activities in their shared space. I understand that sex work is absolutely a line of work for some women, whether it is a chosen path or they fall into it under unfortunate circumstances. I don't believe that there is shame in sex work, and I don't want this video to come across as though we are shaming sex workers. But when you choose to bring men into the environment where your children are, your young, minor, baby, innocent children, that is a huge risk factor because you don't know the individuals personally that you are inviting into their safe space. Aside from working under her own name, she also worked under the name Lollipop, which was on a website called Purple Paw. Now, this website specialized in erotic cosplay and glamour work. Between August 2016 and November 2017, she resided with her children at a residence in Willenhall, which is situated near Walsall. During this time, her landlady Leanne ended up caring for the children more than Louise did, as she was frequently absent and on her personal sexual excursions. Louise spent her time with various men and attending social events, resulting in her neglecting her daughters and failing to take care of them. According to the landlady, Louise would make every effort to avoid being with her daughters and would leave them with her at least 4 times a week. When Leanne was unable to care for them, Louise would find somebody else to take over, constantly pawning the girls off on other people. Leanne also recounted that when Louise's 17-month-old daughter would cry, because we know that's what babies do, they cry, Louise would yell at her to shut the F up or I will give you something to cry about. Leanne also reported witnessing instances where Louise would drag her daughters around the house by their arms and their ankles. Taking a break from parenting responsibilities is perfectly normal and understandable. However, as a mother, you usually long to reunite with your children after that break. But unfortunately, Louise did not feel the same way. She considered her children as a hindrance and a disturbance to her personal interests, such as spending time with men and engaging in activities that she preferred. According to Leanne, during the rare times that Louise did spend with her children, she would easily become agitated with them. She would get very nasty verbally with them, and she would display hostility towards them constantly. Unfortunately, before Leanne could take any action, Louise relocated once again, this time to a place closer to her sister Karen. People who knew Louise state that she would go out clubbing any moment she had the opportunity to. Any chance to get out, she would take it. Despite Louise's strained relationship with most of her family, her sister was a notable exception. She frequently assisted Louise in watching the children to ensure their safety and well-being. Despite their differences, it seemed that Louise could count on her sister Karen when it came to the care of her daughters. And of course, she took full advantage of this. On one occasion, Louise left her daughters alone and asleep at home while she engaged in sexual activity with a stranger in his van parked outside of the house, once again in exchange for payment. Karen, her sister, discovered this and confronted Louise about it, emphasizing the importance of prioritizing her daughters and their well-being. But despite Karen's concerns, Louise made excuses and attempted to evade the conversation. In January 2018, her daughter Lexi began repeatedly visiting the hospital due to an illness that the doctors could not identify. Her condition primarily involved difficulties with breathing, and on January 2nd, paramedics had to intervene to save her life. The medical professionals suspected that Lexi was suffering from a rare chest infection, and she was sent home with antibiotics to help fight this infection. As medical professionals worked tirelessly to save Lexi's life, Louise, her mother, who should have been by her daughter's side, was preoccupied, taking nude photos of herself in the bathroom and sending them to men on dating sites. When the doctors discussed Lexi's presumed condition with Louise, she appeared disinterested and completely unbothered. The medical team speculated that perhaps Louise was fatigued or simply did not exhibit emotions as overtly as other mothers. But on January 4th, Louise called the emergency services once again. Her 3-year-old daughter, Lexi, was found unconscious and was not breathing. Paramedics who arrived at the scene were shocked to discover that Lexi had been unconscious for a considerable period of time before her mother made that emergency call. Her lips, fingers, and eyelids were already blue, indicating that she had stopped breathing a while ago. It was later revealed that 11 minutes before making that emergency call, Louise had texted her sister Karen, claiming that her daughters had suffered some sort of fit. So as paramedics rushed Lexi to the hospital, Louise was once again preoccupied, this time with texting a man on a dating app, negotiating the price of sending him nude photos of herself, and she was doing this all while in the ambulance. Despite the doctor's heroic efforts to resuscitate Lexi, she was left crying, scared, and in pain. But instead of comforting her daughter, Louise continued to focus on her phone, ignoring her daughter's cries for comfort. It was only when the doctor on duty nudged her to comfort her own daughter that Louise reluctantly showed any sign of maternal care. After a 4-day hospital stay, Lexi was discharged with the diagnosis of acute respiratory infection. As Louise left the hospital with her daughter, she exchanged phone numbers with a security guard on duty while offering paid sexual favors. And this is where the story takes a drastic turn, a hard turn left. Over the next few days, Louise's Google searches were questionable, to say the least. They included, man takes his own life by supergluing his mouth shut. Can you actually die if blocked nose and forcibly closed mouth with tape? For how long after drowning can someone be resuscitated? How long does it take a dead body to go cold up to the shoulder? 5 weird things that happen after you die. I mean, alarming to say the least. So Louise arrived home on January 14th with her daughters after spending the day out with Karen, and this is the last video footage of Lexi alive. Later that evening, around 10:30 p.m., she texted a man to complain about Lexi. However, the situation took a drastic turn when Louise called 999 just before 1 a.m. on January 15th, and she reported that Lexi was not breathing.
Ambulance service, is the patient breathing?
No.
They're not breathing?
No.
Okay. And who was it we're talking about?
Lexi, she's 3.
She's 3? Bear with
Yeah.
me. Okay. So she's unconscious and she's not breathing. So help has been arranged, okay?
When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Lexi had been unconscious once again for a long time before Louise even made the call. But unlike the previous times when she was saved, this time, Louise made sure that Lexi was dead first. Upon arrival, paramedics found Lexi unresponsive and displaying clear signs of death. Her skin was cold and pale with a mottled appearance. Her lips had turned blue, and her jaw had already stiffened with rigor mortis. While Louise appeared somewhat distressed, she did not display the expected emotions of a mother in this devastating situation. Louise showed an alarming lack of empathy and disregard for her daughter's passing, as she just chatted away with a man on a dating app the very next day. In her messages, she casually mentioned her daughter's death, in between discussions about tattoos, nude photos, and engaging in paid intercourse. Shockingly, she also accepted 41 friend requests on the Meet Me app, and even agreed to a date with another man later that evening, demonstrating a very disturbing lack of mourning or respect for her very recently deceased child. Her sister Karen confronted Louise about her behavior towards Lexi, but Louise defended herself by saying that she was just trying to be strong for her other daughter, Scarlett. However, Louise's mother, Sharon, was outraged by her daughter's heartless behavior. She even heard Louise laughing while FaceTiming with a man at Lexi's funeral. Sharon strongly condemned her daughter and called her evil. She also criticized social services for missing the clear warning signs of Louise's neglect and her abuse towards her 2 children. Sharon said, "Something snapped in her head. She became a monster. My wonderful little girl changed." Now remember, Sharon didn't have a big relationship with Louise. Louise had pretty much cut her out of her life at this point. But her mother saw all of this happening and was actively concerned and was realizing that something was wrong. On February 1st, after checking into a hotel room with her surviving daughter Scarlett, Louise once again began texting a man for money because apparently Scarlett wasn't feeling well. Later that evening at 9:50 p.m., Louise left the hotel with Scarlett, who Louise claimed was sleeping and not moving. She stopped to fill up her car with fuel before making another stop at a store. However, by 10:20 p.m., Louise called 111, a non-emergency service line, and she was calling to report that Scarlett was now unwell. When asked if this was an emergency, Louise replied saying no. However, when the operator asked her to check Scarlett's vital signs, Louise informed them that Scarlett wasn't breathing. So how was this not an emergency? She waited in a parking lot until the paramedics arrived at 10:30 p.m., and the paramedics found Scarlett completely cold, obviously already dead, and dead for a while. The autopsy report indicated that Scarlett had been deprived of oxygen, and there were visible marks on her neck that were consistent with manual strangulation. While at the hospital, Louise was being monitored by a nurse, as is customary for grieving mothers, but the nurse noticed that Louise didn't seem to be grieving at all. Suspicions were raised, and the nurse reported her concerns to the police, who promptly began investigating the case. The deaths of both daughters, just weeks apart, was very highly suspicious. The autopsies for both girls show that their airways had been deliberately obstructed by shutting their noses and plugging their mouths for prolonged periods of time. This was a consistent finding in both cases. Just a few hours after Scarlett's death, Louise posted a photo of both of the girls on her Snapchat story with a caption, "R.I.P." I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say this. Whether you are the most loving mother in the world or the most cold, calculated, cruel mother in the world, hours after your daughter has died, I don't think that you would be concerned to post on your Snapchat story, "R.I.P." Like, you're not running to social media to post about them. It is a huge red flag. The red flag is a waving. On March 20th, 2018, Louise was finally arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite being faced with such serious allegations, though, Louise maintained her innocence and asked the police, "Why would I kill my own kids?" The case eventually went to trial, where the evidence presented against her was overwhelming. The court heard how Louise had deliberately obstructed the airways of both of her daughters, Lexi and Scarlett, all planned and done to clear the way for her personal, intimate life. The autopsies showed that the girls had suffered from prolonged oxygen deprivation, and there was bleeding around their necks, which was consistent with manual strangulation. The evidence was damning, and the jury found Louise guilty on both counts of first-degree murder. At sentencing, Louise was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 32 years. Her reasons for committing such heinous crimes were clear. She had become so consumed with her own desires and her own wants that her children had become an obstacle in her life. It is truly unimaginable to think that a mother could be so calm and calculated in the face of such horrific crimes against her own flesh and blood. I mean, think back to when she was in the ambulance with her daughter and she was sending nudes and negotiating her rate, all while her daughter is in the ambulance not breathing. It is unbelievable. During the trial, the prosecution presented the video footage of Louise getting gas on the day that Scarlett had died. The footage was analyzed, and it was suggested that Scarlett was either already dead in the back seat or dying at the time that this footage was recorded. Despite this, Louise did not appear to be disturbed or concerned in any way. Instead, she carried on with her routine as if nothing had happened. Louise's defense was that her daughters died of natural causes. However, her behavior after their death was far from typical of a grieving mother. When she was informed of their deaths, she did not display the kind of emotions that one would expect. In fact, witnesses reported that she acted like somebody who had lost their goldfish. The jury also saw the messages that Louise had sent to a man named Patrick that very night. Louise wrote, "Any chance of putting $30 in my bank now for fuel to get my daughter Scarlett back to the hospital? I will transfer it back on Wednesday." She then sent 7 more WhatsApp messages in just over a minute, saying that the little girl was not well and saying that she was not losing another baby. Patrick responded to this flurry of worried text messages, telling Louise to call the ambulance and not to waste any more time. Further evidence has come to light regarding Louise's disturbing behavior following the deaths of her daughter. It had been revealed that she attempted to sell their brightly colored clothing just days after killing them. In a truly shocking move, Louise posted a picture of several bin bags on the app/sell/buy things on a rugby Facebook page, advertising the girls' clothing for a mere £20, with the addition that she could deliver it. The bags contained clothes suitable for girls aged 0 to 3 months up to 9 to 12 months. The sale of her children's belongings not only shows a complete lack of remorse, but also a concerning level of detachment and callousness towards the tragedy that had occurred. It also displays, in my opinion, that she was trying to rid herself of any memory she had of her daughters. She didn't want to be a mother anymore, and now that these girls were physically out of the picture and gone, she needed to get rid of any clothes, any toys, any semblance that they ever were alive. It is absolutely unbelievable and just so callous. At the end of the trial, when it came time for the verdict, Louise stood completely poker-faced as jurors returned the verdicts after a 4-week trial. Judge Mrs. Justice Yip told Louise, "One way or another, you squeezed the life out of your daughters. Why you did so only you know. Your actions have devastated so many lives. Lexi and Scarlett had so much to offer to their wider family, but you took all of that away. Your internet searches were sinister. You delayed calling for an ambulance until you were sure she was dead. These were blameless young children who were plainly vulnerable and ought to have been able to rely on their mother to protect and nurture them. The girl's father, Chris Draper, spoke after the trial in a very heartbreaking statement, saying, "When we lost Lexi, we were heartbroken and couldn't believe that she had gone. Then we were devastated to hear about Scarlett. Only having a short time with Lexi and never even meeting Scarlett makes it all the more heartbreaking. We will miss out on all of those special occasions that they would have celebrated. Their first day at school, birthdays, getting married, and having children of their own. The loss of Lexi and Scarlett has not just affected the immediate family, but also all those who were part of their lives. The only comfort is that Lexi and Scarlett are together. We would like to thank everyone for their support and help." The tragic events surrounding Louise continued to unfold when on February 2nd, 2020, the police discovered the lifeless body of her mother, Sharon. Sharon's family and loved ones strongly believe that she took her own life as a result of the torment caused by her daughter's unspeakable crimes. The pain and devastation of losing her only 2 grandchildren in such a brutal and heinous way would have been unbearable for Sharon. Louise's heinous actions have left many people absolutely stunned and outraged, asking again, how could a mother intentionally kill her own children, let alone for such a selfish reason as her intimate life? It's a shocking and disturbing reminder that even those closest to us can harbor deep and very disturbing secrets. The consequences of her actions have been devastating. Not only have 2 innocent lives been lost, but countless others have been impacted as well. Family members, friends, and even strangers have been left reeling from the senseless violence. While Louise will spend the rest of her life in prison, the legacy of her actions will continue to haunt those who knew her and loved her daughters. It is extremely important that we take the time to remember Lexi and Scarlett and honor their memory. They were innocent victims who deserved a chance to grow up and live full, happy lives. It is up to all of us to ensure that such tragedies never happen again, which by all means, I know it's easier said than done. But if you notice something that gives you an uneasy pit in your stomach, get loud. Bring attention to it. Be a voice for the voiceless, and let's try to stop these horrific stories before they happen. There is no harm in raising your hand if you truly believe that something is wrong and there's reason to be concerned. It's better to be alert and err on the side of caution than play Monday morning quarterback and wish you had done things differently in hindsight. So please share this video where you can. It helps raise awareness. It helps generate awareness again, because I feel we all just need to have a heightened sense of awareness of what to look for, different clues, different signs, different behaviors, so that the likelihood of somebody identifying it and raising their hand and stopping things before it gets this far gone and this far down a dark road, hopefully that the odds of that increase if more awareness is generated. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in with me today. I know it was a heartbreaking one to hear, so I appreciate you sticking through it. I will talk with you very soon. And until the next case, stay safe.